Welcome to the program today. Mano Gonzalez here in studio with a very good friend, L.A. Marzulli, and we're going to be talking about a very important topic, which again is as L.A. likes to say, it's
real versioning and not going away.
Yeah, welcome, L.A.
Great to be here, Mondo.
And one of the things before we get into this, I just want to remind everybody about a couple things just that is happening here at Prophecy Watchers, and that is we are having the Orlando Prophecy Summit in Orlando, Florida, where we're going to have 15 different speakers coming and sharing about all the things that are happening so fast. So again, you can get information at prophecywatchers.com on both of those really projects that we're doing. It's kind of fun. But LA, you have, what I want to do today is give a prophecy update on really UFO disclosure, and we're going to cover that in detail. But you've been certainly working on this for a long time. Kind of give the audience a little summary about, you have a brand new film. It's just right on the precipice of coming out in a series on UFO disclosure.
Sure.
Kind of give us a synopsis of the three films.
Well, the first film, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year-old cover-up, what we do is we talk about the ongoing UAP, UFO phenomena. The centerpiece of that film is Al Matthews. Al Matthews was taken, he was abducted from childhood, early childhood. He had an encounter with a hybrid entity, which is very unnerving. And even when I say those words to people, people were taken aback by that. They just, what do you mean a hybrid entity? Well, Daniel tells us, the book of Daniel, chapter 2 tells us that in the latter days, seal up the book, Daniel, till the time of the end, first of all, that men and women will run to and fro over the face of the earth and knowledge will increase. We're here. And then it also says that their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to them. So this hybrid entity was the seed of the dragon on some level. She was not entirely human. She wasn't. And I realize for some people, you kind of go, wait a minute. If it was just one person reporting that, it's one thing. But when you've been studying this phenomenon for decades and you hear the same story over and over and over and over again from people from all walks of life, all ethnicities, all backgrounds, the whole deal, something's going on here. So Al Matthews really became the centerpiece of that film because of his abduction and his ongoing abduction.
What year was number one?
Number one was originally released in 2016.
16, okay.
And that was my first independent film apart from our Watchers series. I redid it in 2020. And the reason why I did this was because of
much we're going to discuss, yeah.
What we're going to discuss here. So the second film, I sat down with the head of Exopolitics Portugal, Francisco Carrera, and he is, like myself and others, he's been immersed in the phenomena for decades. And so we're talking shop. Francisco, myself, Preston Dennett, author. He's written, 4 or 5 books on the subject, maybe even more. He lives in my neck of the woods in the Santa Monica Mountains. So, we're talking all things ufology. And one of the questions that I bring up to both of them, what about Roswell? And Francisco just shrugs his shoulders and laughs and says, wasn't a weather balloon. It wasn't a weather balloon. I sat down with Jesse Marcel Jr. That's as close as to the event as I've ever gotten. Stan Friedman was the researcher who actually talked to Jesse Marcel Sr. Marcel was there, part of the 509th Bomber Group in Roswell, New Mexico, when the disc crashed. He retrieved the metal and brought it home and showed his son and his wife at like 3 in the morning. You don't wake your wife up at 3 in the morning if it's a weather balloon. And to think that it was a weather balloon is patently absurd. There are well-meaning people out there that it's insisting it's a weather balloon. I've spoken, but Marcel Jr. has passed away now. He went on the record, and it's in our book. It's also in our film, UFO Disclosure, basically stating that what he saw was material not from this world. And of course, all that was covered up. This is 1947. Things have changed since 47.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Drastically changed. So that's really in the first and second film, just a real quick thumbnail sketch. But we talk about so many different subjects, and these two guys, Francisco and Preston Dennett. I mean, they're like cutting edge guys. They're from the other side of the aisle. They don't have a Christian biblical worldview. I understand that. But the whole purpose of sitting down with them and talking with them is to kind of bump up against them a little bit. And I do that. I mean, I throw some prophecy out there and say, well, what do you think about this? And and Francisco's going, well, now it's all about the threat. And that's exactly where we find ourselves in 2022. It is all about the threat. And of course, Congress is, coloring it, if I can use that word, coloring the whole phenomena with the idea that there's being a threat being posed to our national security. So.
And so the third film, what are you covering that in this one?
The third film is called Close Encounters, and it deals with people that have really come on the record. Circling back to the first one, Paul McGuire. Actually, I'll save that. Just remember Paul McGuire, because he says something in 2016 which is absolutely profound, and I'll get into that. But the third film is Close Encounters, people about close encounters, very up close and personal. One woman, her name is Corey, and she has an encounter, and she's with a friend, and all of a sudden everything goes really still, classic. The locks go down on the car, classic. They always mess with the electrical grid. And all of a sudden they look up, they're outside the car because something weird is going on, and they see this craft just materialize in front of them. And it gets bigger and bigger, and Corey is being lifted up off the ground. She's being abducted, and she cries out to Jesus, and she stops the abduction. That's just one of the close encounters that happens in the film, one of the people that we spoke to. One of the ones, another one, and this is right in my neck of the woods, the Day of the Fire, 2018, the Day of the Fire. This woman, Judy Mora, she lives about a mile from us, and she's up. We're down here, she's up here on one of the mountaintops. And so the fire is raging, the sky is all full of smoke, and she takes a picture just of the sky, doesn't think anything else about it. And a couple of months later, she's looking at those pictures of that day. She lost her home too. We lost everything in the 2018 fire. And lo and behold, literally, folks, directly over our house is a UFO that day. And we talk about it. We show the original photograph on her cell phone. So this is in Photoshop. You can see the windows. It's a metallic disc, a craft, literally right in the field behind the house, the day of the fire. And so, what is it doing there? Why is it there the day of the fire? And again, we lost everything. So those are some of the particulars in episode 3 that we actually get into.
The thing that I like about just the opportunity to continue to research is this topic of UFOs, and now officially there's UAPs, and now as we're gonna see, there's other names for them that the government is giving them. But one of the things that you come to is this has been discussed, but it's really been, for the most part, ridiculed. I mean, we think about, you believe in from Martians and aliens, and even to this point, I got an email this past week, and I understand. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but they're like, why are you talking about this? Why do you talk about UFOs? And there's a couple reasons. Number one is I like to be evangelistic, and I think as Christians, we need to have a biblical worldview for everything. And yeah, we talk about some of the fringe topics, but the fact of the matter is, we've come to a point now, and this is what I shared with this person that emailed me, is, hey, this is something that the government's talking about, and I'm going to give you some evidence for this so that there's no, all the things that have been said for those that have been behind the scenes in the fringe groups, now it's mainstream, and we're going to talk about the disclosure ladder and what that means. But the fact that it's become so mainstream, this isn't tinfoil hats, unless we're going to accuse Congress and Senator Rubio, that's on the Intelligence Committee, that he should put on a tinfoil hat because they're discussing these things. It's become so mainstream now that as Christians, we need to have
an answer.
Absolutely. And so there is a paradigm and a worldview there, a biblical worldview. We don't have all the answers, but we're trying to have an answer. So I think we're being responsible. But one of the things I want to do here, and I'm going to really press LA on some of this, is that LA has discussed in many of his programs and his updates in the films about, and I like your analogy, the UFO disclosure ladder. Kind of right there at the beginning, what do you mean by that?
Well, in 2017, on Tucker Carlson, I'll never forget it, I was watching this, and I'm going to circle back to our first film, UFO Disclosure, because I asked Paul McGuire in 2016 when I'm filming, Paul, when do you think disclosure will happen? And Paul McGuire looks right at the camera and goes, well, it'll either happen this year or at the latest in 2017. It's going to happen soon. And I'm just kind of, well, that's interesting. So here it is.
Wait. What's before you go? I mean,
Yeah.
what's disclosure? Well, I mean, what
Well,
does that even mean?
Disclosure.
Start from the beginning with somebody that might not
disclosure
know.
to Paul at that meant that the government or the powers that be are going to actually declare that the phenomenon is genuine, is real.
Okay, so they're going to legitimize
They're going to
it.
legitimize it on some level. So it moves from, with all due respect to George Norrie and people like me who have been studying the phenomena, we're on the fringe, we're tinfoil hat, we're conspiracy theorists. But now all of a sudden it's going to be legitimized. So I'm watching Tucker Carlson. It's December of 2017. And Tucker, I'll never forget it. He leads off and he goes, it's the last segment of the program on a Friday. UFOs used to be the stuff of tinfoil hats and conspiracy theorists. But maybe we shouldn't think that anymore. Commander David Fravor, former F-18 pilot, joins us tonight, along with film of a tic-tac shaped UFO object that he filmed in his gun sights over the Pacific. Fravor's on. So I'm just sitting here going like, what? So it's a triptych. You've got Tucker Carlson here, Fravor in the middle, and over here you've got which at one time was classified film showing the F-18 engaging the tic-tac shaped white object. And the interview goes like this, and Tucker says, well, in your opinion, what do you think this was? So now we're down to the meat and potatoes. We're down to the bone of the steak.
This is a
right?
professional
This
pilot
is it.
who's very
Trained
skilled.
observer, sober as the day is long, the whole 9 yards. He looks right at the camera and says, whatever this was not from this earth. That's groundbreaking. And it also begs the question, and you've heard me talk about this before, who picks up the phone?
Yeah. Who allowed him to say that?
Who allowed him to say that? Who arranged it to go on Tucker? And why Tucker Carlson? Because out of all the media, Tucker Carlson's show is watched by conservative Christians. That's the mainstay of his audience. So they run this up the flagpole to see what the reaction is. Flatline.
Provide the video imagery. Yep.
The whole deal.
Yep.
So, and it's flatline. Nobody says anything. Nobody talks about it. My phone doesn't ring, per se. I get a couple of emails from people. I'm bracing myself for the onslaught. There is none.
I think there's a little bit of shock, though. I think some people are like,
were
whoa,
shocked.
did this really happen?
Yeah.
So I can understand maybe some of the reticence for people to talk about is they're still kind of dealing with at least the initial shock and that, hey, we've been thinking about this for years. Was that really true? Did I really just see that?
Well, and what amazes me, I mean, I got on the phone and I called elder brother Gary Stearman the moment it happened and said, oh my gosh, did you see this? And we talked for, 45 minutes to an hour about this. And from that episode, I coined the phrase, the ladder, the first rung of the disclosure ladder. That's the first rung of a disclosure ladder. People go, how many rungs are there, LA? I have no idea.
Well, let's talk.
We don't know.
On our paper here, we kind of organized it in the sense of we have at least 12. We're going to cover them, but I think the important thing here is this is our particular item of 12 is subjective to some degree. But,
yeah, I mean, it can be moved around.
Yeah, it can move around, but it is objective in the sense of thinking about the legitimization of the whole idea of UFOs, UAPs. What are they? What do they mean? And so here we are, 2017. Comes on Tucker. Number 2, February of 2018. Talk to us about what happened then.
They had this guy, I've never seen him before, Luis Elizondo, and he was the head of ATIP, which I won't go into, but he was there, and the old CIA and the dirty money from, Harry Reid and all sorts of, typical government. Look over here, why something's happening over there. Yeah. But Elizondo gets on, and he announces something on Tucker.
He's on Tucker.
And he says, we now have materials that we're analyzing that are not from this earth. And Tucker goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, there's some from the private sector, crash disks, whatever, also some from the government. We are analyzing the metal. I'm sitting there, once again, I call Gary Stearman up on the phone. Did you see this? This is the second rung of a disclosure ladder. Elizondo, again, is an unknown. No one knows who Elizondo is, really. But somehow he winds up on Tucker Carlson once again, and he's revealing something that they are testing the metal from crashed UFOs.
See,
and no one's batting an eyelash here,
This is really important because oftentimes, and I've heard this, and I've kind of resisted it in the sense that people just go, oh, well, they're lights in the sky, they're demonic, and they just leave it there. And I'm not saying that it's good, but by saying it's demonic, it's oftentimes it's spiritual, it's just tricks, it's lights of the sky. But Now they're coming out and saying, no, this is something physical.
Well,
that changes the whole game. How does that change the game, really?
It changes the game. I mean, I remember arguing with so-called Christian ufologists years ago, 20 years ago, and they insisted that all this was not nuts and bolts. It was all demonic delusion. And that's their paradigm, and they're entitled to it. And I love them as brothers in Christ, but I think they are 100% wrong. And now with what Elizondo and others are talking about, this is nuts and bolts hardware.
Like when you say nuts and bolts, tangible physical
evidence, all day long. So with all due respect to those who believe that it's demonic delusion, they're entitled to what they want to believe. But our government is coming out stating that, Luis Elizondo is stating, who's really not part of our government. He's part of a separate little deal that was formed up to study the phenomena. And the anagram was ATIP, Advanced Aeronautical Threat Identification Program. And so Elizondo is stating that we've got materials not from this earth, some from the private sector, some from the government. Now, is Elizondo lying? Is this just all hype and nonsense and to create some sort of deliberate obfuscation? No, they've got the metal, they are testing it. That's the second rung on the ladder.
So what I want to summarize here is that at this point, we haven't discussed, at least, in the moment, about what's behind this. What we're trying to establish here is the way that the government is discussing this. And we're trying to give you evidence in order to bring this up to family, friends, whatever, in order just to discuss the facts. We're not talking any spirituality yet. We're not talking about who they are or what their agenda is. We're going to get to that. Okay, so in number 3, in October 9th of 2020, again, Tucker Carlson interviews Christopher Mellon specifically about the government hiding evidence. Talk a little bit about the third rung.
And notice the gap between February and October. There was this huge gap. And it's amazing how they just kind of leach the information out and then pull back. And then give some more and then pull back. So Christopher Mellon, former CIA guy, how does he get on Tucker Carlson? Who's picking up the phone? How does Luis Elizondo get on Tucker Carlson? Is Tucker's producer looking for this? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. That's conjecture on my part. So Mellon basically on Tucker says that a couple of things. That number one, the government is hiding evidence. But the number two is, which is really important, and it's to Luis Elizondo's remark, the materials not found on this earth. We've tested the materials. We now found isotopic ratios not found on this earth. In other words, whatever this metal is, it's manufactured someplace else. Circling back to Jesse Marcel Jr., who I interviewed, what he said was whatever this metal that he held in his hands wasn't from here. It was, and his father said, what you're touching is material from another world. So there you go.
And the other one that happened right at the same time, real closer, is in July of 2020. But Pentagon, Tucker's on there, Pentagon to release info of off-world vehicles, again, using that phraseology, not made on this earth.
Yeah, you see, when they say things like this, what amazes me is, and maybe we're also bombarded with information that we've just grown numb and we're not hearing what's being said. For the Pentagon, a Pentagon leaker, or however this thing came about, stating that we have in our possession off-world vehicles not made on this earth, stop the presses.
Stop the presses.
Stop the presses. In my opinion, every pastor in America should have stood up and said, okay, I'm not making this up, folks, but you just need to know, so you're not alarmed, and it doesn't take you by surprise, that this is what your government is telling you. And this dovetails into Bob Lazar, who was, of course, ridiculed and excoriated and, keel-hauled intellectually in the whole 9 yards, when he said that I was out at Area 51, Papoose Lake, and I was back engineering propulsion systems from craft not made of this world. So the fact that this comes out on Tucker once again, stating on the record that whatever this is, off-world vehicles not made on this earth, that's earth-shattering, Mondo.
I remember,
earth-shattering.
So let's get the time frame here. So now we're in fall of 2020, and I remember I was pastoring at the time, and this information's coming out. And man, the first thing I did is talked about it in our Sunday school class, in small groups, because I was like, hey, did you guys hear what was going on with Tucker? And again, trying to, and I remember trying to just have a conversation. I remember some people were a little bit, well, because oftentimes in our culture, at least before, people were shamed. Oh, you're one of those, you're a conspiracy guy. And so I was trying to say, hey, look, you don't have to allow yourself to be shamed anymore. And what we need to remember is that in the fall of 2020, the election had happened, and then in December, Trump signs or gives an order, an instruction, along with Congress, in order for the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, to come up with an official report within 6 months. Like, you have got to come up with a report to instruct Congress about these happenings, because again, it's been building up, they've seen it on the news. And so this is where it's interesting that the government officially gets involved to say, prepare a report. And so here we are, 2021, we're waiting, when's the report? It's been 6 months, it's in December. And then June 25th, 2021, the official report comes out by the Pentagon. And was it thousands of pages?
Oh, absolutely. Thousands of pages, it's a big nothing burger. It's like, what, 8, 9 pages?
8 pages.
8 pages. And it's a nothing burger. And to give you, the audience, some sort of way of judging this, when the government hired a group of scientists to look at the effect of bovine flatulence on greenhouse gases, it's almost 1,000 pages. So we get 8 pages on the most
sanitized
completely. There's nothing to see here. Out of 144 cases, we didn't know what 143 are. This is groundbreaking. This is groundbreaking in the sense of, you want to talk deliberate obfuscation, well, here it is. They know what's going on. They only give us 8 pages. And it has profound implications for every single person on this planet. Profound implications. And this is why it's time for the church to become the spearhead and begin to talk about it from a biblical viewpoint. And that's why I call it the coming great deception.
Yeah, we haven't got there yet.
We haven't got there, but we will.
We will.
We're leading up to it.
Yeah, because I think this is important, because think about this, June of 2021, that's not even 18 months ago. So the Pentagon officially brings this report out. I'll give you a couple things. 144 reports, as LA mentioned. One of them they knew was a weather balloon. Of the 143, I remind you.
Gotta get the weather balloon.
Yeah, gotta get the weather. They want to have some.
It's a weather balloon.
And many people think that the Pentagon, because of other avenues, and who knows, we don't have all the information, but that their hand is being forced. Whether it is or not, don't know. But of the 143, 80 reports involved observation with multiple sensors. This was their conclusion. Most of the UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, so you can't say UFO anymore, it's UAP, reported, it says most of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects, given that a majority of the UAP were registered across multiple sensors to include radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapon seekers, and visual observation. And a handful of the UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology. So this was part of that 8-page report. I remember reading it, so I took out some highlights here. And so this is June. Okay? The government has admitted officially that these are physical things. And then, as you mentioned, they begin to describe it in such a way as being a national security threat. That's how they're...
It's all about the threat.
It's all about the threat, okay? What else do you have to say about this report?
Well, other than it being a huge nothing burger, it just, what amazes me, once again, they do this, they release the report, it's national news, it's everywhere, and no one really reacts to it. Where is the outrage that,
we've been lied to, right?
Yeah, once again, how many times do we have to lay down and listen to this nonsense where you guys know exactly what's going on? You're not coming clean, you're not telling us. You're deliberately obfuscating the truth. You're hiding it from the American people. And we have a shadow government. Now, you can believe that or not believe it, but they don't care who's in office. They're just going to run and do their thing no matter what.
Yep. So this is in June. And so, of course, this government report comes out. And so now there's you see the trickle effect of what's going on within Congress, the House and the Senate. And November 15th of 2021, I just have a page here, page 8,106 of one of the, what they're doing is in July of the year, they're giving out the fiscal budget for the following year. And so this is kind of making its way, but this is from the Senate record, 1683, and it talks about the establishment of the Anomaly Surveillance and Resolution Office. The duties of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force is to do such and such. One of them is to develop procedures to synchronize and standardize the collection, reporting, and analysis of incidents, including adverse physiological effects, which we'll get to, regarding unidentified aerial phenomenon across the department and in consultation with the Intelligence Committee. So I got this Congress.gov. I mean, I'm reading, this isn't tinfoil hats, this isn't some kook. So this is something that they are putting in the official record of trying to establish now. They've established it as a threat. The Pentagon has provided some information, certainly not all. There's classified stuff.
Let me stop you right there. They established it as a threat so they can get the funding.
So they can get the funding.
That's the way it works.
Yep.
Right.
It's so true.
Which is really hysterical
So
when you think about it.
one of the things that you talked about was, so that was in November.
Right.
December, which is now, 10 months ago, 9 months ago, number 6, NASA begins to approach.
We're not making this up.
Well, let's talk about the Brookings Institute report, which goes back probably 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
Kind of give that and how it comes to the current NASA hiring theologians.
Well, yeah, the fact that never a straight answer is hiring theologians. It goes back to the Brookings report because the Brookings report states that if and when they do show up, the impact sociologically in religious organizations, there's nothing to frame it. I mean, the Catholic Church isn't talking about it. Evangelicals aren't talking about this.
It's going to demolish their faith, so to speak. That's what they said.
That's what they're
claimed.
That's what they're terrified of.
Yep.
Now what happens? And they're right, because no one's talking. We're talking about it. We're the tip of the spear going, this is the coming great deception. We'll get to that point, because that's eventually when they show up. That's the top rung of a ladder. Full-blown disclosure. Everything changes. The entire planet changes like that. But the fact that NASA is hiring, it's sort of funny, they're hiring priests. Well, my phone didn't ring. Why doesn't someone ask me about this? I'll tell them exactly what's going on. And it gets into the whole idea of, I just finished a book by a Catholic author on the plurality of worlds. I always have trouble saying plurality. But on, multiple life on other planets, basically. As an evangelical, I will say this. Is it possible? Anything's possible. I get that. Yeah. Do I believe in it? No, I don't. And I have reasons for that. The New Jerusalem comes to planet Earth, not instead of reticuli. Jesus comes to Earth. Could there be beings on other planet that didn't fall, like C.S. Lewis talks about? That's conjecture we don't know.
It's all conjecture.
And I know we might differ on this. Heaven's rolled up like a scroll, creates a new heaven and earth. Is it a recreation? Maybe, I don't know. Okay. The bottom line is, rolling things up like a scroll to me is very deliberate. It's like, wait a minute. If we're in a holographic universe, everything begins to make sense, because now we understand how these entities can come in and manipulate space, time, matter, and energy that we don't know about in ways that defy our physics. So it's interesting that they hire priests. I just wonder why there weren't some evangelicals on that committee, talking about. Because I don't think most, and I'm broad brushing here, painting with a broad brush, that most evangelicals, I would posit, do not believe in the plurality of worlds. Where the Catholics, like I'm reading 2 or 3 books by Catholic theologians, they're all into it.
The official astronomers of the Vatican are very open. Absolutely.
They're believing in that. Yeah. I'm not.
Yeah, me either.
I'm not.
Well, let's summarize here again. So it's not that NASA is going out and hiring them directly. What NASA does often is they subcontract. So they subcontracted a certain institute where that institute would then reach out to theologians who would discuss the ramifications, again, of what would happen if now that we're having all this security threat, what does the average religious person think about potential otherworldly craft, aliens, whatever that looks like. So NASA's looking to have some information. And so, again, the fact that NASA would officially acknowledged that it's subcontracting out based on 4 years now. So this was in December of 21. We've had 4 years of disclosure, little bits here and there. Again, we're only just kind of getting the highlights. But they're talking, they want to know what are the ramifications sociologically, religiously, etc. So number 7 here. I found this one to be extremely pertinent because April, this is just a few months ago, March, April, the Sun Online back in 2017, I'll give the background here, when Louis Elizondo, when he begins to talk about the ATIP program, the ATIP program was operating from 2007 to 2012. So the Sun Online was like, well, we want to get information on that.
Right.
So back in 2017, they file a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, saying we want the documents on that ATIP program. Took 5 years. Finally,
right.
the Department of Defense, you can see this online, go to Sun Online and put in FOIA requests. They give 1,500 pages from the Department of Defense of the Advanced Aviation, Threat Identification Program. The report was called The Anomalous Acute Subacute Field Effects on Human and Biological Tissues. So this hits like 1,500 pages. It hits a bombshell where now we have official government documents talking about what? What is in this 1,500 pages? This is tremendous.
And what's amazing about this is I first saw it on Bret Baier on Fox News, even though the Sun broke it. I understand that. But what Bret Baier kind of boiled it down for the average guy on the street and stated this, that some women who are taken aboard UFOs become pregnant. I'll say it again. Some women who are taken aboard UFOs become pregnant. Our 4th film in the series deals with this. And this is my wheelhouse. This is something I've been talking about for decades. And it goes back into the biblical worldview, right back to Genesis 3:15. The seed of the dragon, the offspring of the dragon, will be at enmity or war with the offspring, the seed of the woman. The proto-evangelium, the one coming from the woman, will crush the dragon's head. That sets up the entire biblical prophetic narrative. Skip over to Daniel where it says, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. Jesus will be like the days of Noah. When he returns, what differentiates the days of Noah is a commingling of the seed. It's Gary Stearman used to say it's all about the seed, and it's all about the seed. It always has been in the past, and that's where we are now. Their seed is mingling with the seed of men. Women are think about this. This is Bret Baier. This is Fox News, and Bret is more down to earth and stoic and completely unreadable than Tucker Carlson. Tucker wears his heart on his sleeve. He lets you know exactly. He laughs, he gesticulates, he scoffs, he bully rags the guests sometimes, and whatever he does, you know Tucker by his emotion. Bret Baier is like, I'm Bret Baier and I don't have any emotion. And Bret Baier says in this very extremely sober and acerbic, if I can use that word, posture, look that one up, that women are becoming pregnant who are taken aboard UFOs. That is my wheelhouse. That is number 4 in the film series. We've got women who have been taken. They've been obviously abducted. They've been taken. They've been impregnated. I've heard this for years, for decades. And during that pregnancy, usually in the first trimester, around the 3rd month, they're re-abducted. The baby is taken from them. There's no trace of it. At the end of part 3, we tease to part 4. And this woman, her name is Karen. And when you watch that little 2 or 3 minute clip from 4, it's visceral. And she's in with her doctor, and with no fetal tissue, no heartbeat, didn't find anything in the DNC when they went in to help her clean her out. Nothing, no trace. And the doctor goes, "Are you sure you were pregnant?" And she goes, "Yes, I was pregnant. My doctor, I was pregnant." Happened 3 times to her. They took her, they abducted her, they impregnated her 3 times. We talked to a man who was raped by 2 of these things. Raped by them. They took his seed. Now I realize this is the stuff people go, "Whoa, LA, whoa," and they get afraid. They don't want to talk about this. It's in our Bibles. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. We're warned.
So let's do a little summary here, because again, some of this, maybe you've never heard it before, and some of it sounds really strange. But so even if we were to take the biblical, just go with me for a moment, take the biblical side out of it, okay? And most people don't have a biblical worldview. But when the Department of Defense in this particular ATIP program from 07 to 12, they were researching interactions between human beings and these other UAPs. That's all they were doing. They were researching at an official level. And the report here, it was prepared for the Department of the DIA, warned that these interactions that were forced, these forced interactions between these other physical crafts and humans, was a threat to the United States. Humans had been found to have been injured from exposure to these anomalous vehicles, especially airborne, and when they were in close proximity to these craft, okay? This is the official DoD report. Again, you go online, go to Sun Online, you can look it up, 1,500 pages, and this was the official FOIA request that was given by the government. So they're the ones saying this, and this isn't us. The report noted that often these injuries are related to electromagnetic radiation, that's a physical thing, and links them to energy-related propulsion systems.
Bingo.
Okay? Some of the effects that the government found included burns, heart problems, sleep disturbances, and even bizarre, and we agree, bizarre occurrences such as apparent abduction and unaccounted for pregnancy. That is straight out of the report. This isn't something that we're discussing. Now, here we are, we're in a Sunday school class, hopefully, or a small group, and they go, hey, did you see the latest report that the government issued about potential things that are coming between the crafts and humans? And they go, yeah, did you see that they're saying that they found apparent unaccounted for pregnancy? And we go, what should we say to that? Well, as Christians, we go to the Bible and we find the Genesis 6 paradigm, as you're describing, Daniel and others, that we see a paradigm in the scripture.
Correct.
That could match. So again, for a moment, let's keep the Bible out for a second. Okay? Heart problems, sleep disturbances, burns, and unaccounted for pregnancies, and forced abductions. Is that good or evil?
Well, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. It's totally evil in every way.
These are unwelcome. So even if we take the Bible out,
no one is consenting.
No one's consenting.
Right.
So they're recognizing here, the government's recognizing that these actions are not friendly. They don't know what to do with it because they don't come from a biblical paradigm.
And that's where the whole thing, where they couch it as a threat.
They couch it as a threat. I would certainly feel threatened.
Well, it is. It is. But see, what they don't tell you is, and this goes back into the Eisenhower years, where this quid pro quo happened, and I believe it happened at Holloman Air Force Base. We don't know that. It's conjecture. But the fact that it's been leaked out, the fact that it's part of the ufology, where Eisenhower was whisked away, was missing for 24 hours. Oh, the trip to the dentist, not buying that for a minute, folks. So he's at Holloman Air Force Base. There's a treaty between the so-called ETs and us. Oh yeah, you give us the ships, the
technology,
technology, and we'll give you access to the population with some, provisos here. You have to tell us who you're taking, how, but they don't do that.
Right.
That goes right out the window. And that goes into Bob Lazar years later in the 90s, where he's working on the propulsion system, trying to back engineer. So, when you start putting all the pieces together, what's rumor, innuendo,
it's hard,
and then what is hard, cold facts? The bottom line is that people who in proximity of UFOs are having anomalous things happen to them, their physiology, and it's not good.
See, so that thing, LA makes a good point there in the sense that we want to deal, what we're dealing with in this particular update is cold, hard fact. Okay, we're not speculating.
This is not conjecture. This is we're just reporting what the government has told us.
So here we are. We're coming up. We talked about the Department of Defense, the FOIA request that's the Sun put out in April, March, April. Also in April, Tucker discusses cattle mutilations and the UAP connections. Now, again, if you never heard of cattle mutilations, this is something that we did a program on, and that'll be coming out eventually. But the FBI did official, is the FBI going to get involved and crank things? No, they're not going to waste resources, but they investigated thousands of cattle mutilations beginning back in the 80s and 90s, and that's a whole nother program. But Tucker now, he comes on and he's discussing cattle mutilations officially and the connection specifically with UAP. Talk about that.
Cattle mutilations, I remember reading about it and seeing Linda Moulton Howe's award-winning documentary, Strange Harvest. This is back in the 90s. I'm researching for my first book from Zondervan and Nephilim, the first book of the Nephilim trilogy. It's a novel. And I'm watching this, and I'm watching 10, 15 minutes at a time, and I'm turning off and walking out of the room because it was so disturbing. And there's nothing, folks, there's nothing in your grid system which prepares you for this. Nothing. And that's why when you watch it, it can be incredibly disturbing.
And it's a fact. This is FBI
I've
documented. It's a fact. And let me just say one thing about that, and then you can continue. The FBI concluded this wasn't some cult out in the middle of nowhere. They're like, no, this is not. The mechanisms of how these things happened were beyond explainable
we
methods.
don't have, not. The cattle are carved up with surgical precision. The predators, the coyotes, vultures, ravens, won't get near it.
They won't eat it.
They won't eat it.
They won't eat it. There it is.
Wonder why.
Yep.
Wonder
They will
why.
not eat it. We don't know why.
The cows
Yep.
distance themselves from where the mutilated cow is.
So how did Tucker present it?
Well, he had two butchers on. And they ping-ponged and showed a few of the, certainly not the most graphic.
Thankfully.
Because some of the stuff is like really disturbing. And the fact, this is why it's deliberate. When a rancher comes out and sees that cow mutilated like that, they're terrified. They're confused, they're terrified, they don't know what to do. Law enforcement comes out, they take some pictures, nothing ever happens. They never find the perpetrators. They see lights in the sky, some of the ranchers report that. Next day they come out, there's the cattle, completely drained of blood, the jaws excised, eyes removed. The butchers on Tucker Carlson, circling back to Tucker, stated on the record that this is done, they're butchers.
They know.
They know.
Yep.
They're working with really sharp utensils. This is beyond anything we can do, and we're professional butchers. Whoever's doing this is something that you would see in an operating room. It's done surgically. It's something else to think about, folks. You can go online and see it yourself, that bovine blood from cattle is often used, can be used, not often, but can be used in human transfusions. And this goes right back into the breeding program, where the women are, and this is conjecture on my part, but this is based on me being submerged, if I can use that word, in the phenomenon literally for decades. Women are taken, they become pregnant. In the third month of their first trimester, they're taken, reabducted, the baby is taken from them. Other abductees report seeing different babies in different forms, stages of growth, immersed in some sort of a liquid in a container. That's an artificial womb. The bovine blood, in my opinion, is used in those artificial
nutrients
wombs.
and stuff.
That's what it's used for, in my opinion. Can I prove that? No, I can't. But that's based on, that's me connecting dots.
We're trying to, we're doing the best we can.
Research. It's conjecture, and that's why, take it with a grain of salt. There's a caveat there.
So that was number 8 on the again, the disclosure letter. Number 9, May 17th, just again not too long ago. I remember this hitting the news. A House Intelligence Subcommittee is holding the first congressional hearing on UFOs in 50 years, as building evidence on the sightings raise more question than answers.
It's just unbelievable, and I watched some of it and followed it. These are elected officials.
Are they wearing tinfoil hats when they're in there?
Oh, absolutely. They all, in order to walk in, you had to wear your tinfoil hat. So Congress is looking at this thing, and they're all talking about the threat. We need to know more. And of course, the government agencies, which have been in place, they don't care who's elected. They get their black money and off they go. The American people, in my opinion, the American people have every right to know exactly what's going on. Who's doing it, what they're saying, what's going on in the underground labs. Folks, call me what you want. I really don't care. I got a thick skin. But I will tell you this. There's stuff that's going on that we won't talk about on this show you would just sit there with your jaw on the ground. It's evil, it's pernicious, it's nefarious. And unfortunately, in my opinion, our government, not our government, but a facet of our government knows all about this, and in some ways are in cahoots with them.
Yeah. I mean, the May congressional meeting, what they do is they come in and they're giving they're doing some preliminary investigation hearings. And why? Because come July, they have to come up with the dispersion, or at least written financial budgets for the following year. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But okay, so let's go to number 10. You know, on Fox Nation, they're bringing really some ramifications from the other stuff up again. Talk about it.
Well, anyone, or what they're saying is some people who are in close proximity of UFOs, in other words, you stand underneath one for a period of time, you can wind up with all sorts of things happening in your brain that you don't want. And what's amazing about this, once again, if it's all demonic delusion, then how is this happening? It's not delusion. It's nuts and bolts craft.
It's real.
It's from the other side. It's nefarious. They have an evil agenda. We all agree on that. But there's craft, and there's energy coming from the craft. And isn't it funny? Not funny. It's tragic how people who are near these things, and then they're not believed. Oh, it's all in your head. Oh, it's delusion. No, it's not delusion. These people are experiencing something, and it's incredibly nefarious. It's evil, and there's a real problem with that. So we need to understand that there's physicality to this. There's physicality. Ships come, ships go. People are taken aboard. They're abducted. They become impregnated. The babies are taken. All this is real. All this is happening, and it's high strangeness.
It's high strangeness.
It's high strangeness. But let me just say something here, and I know you're probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but welcome to my world. When Jesus is fasting in the desert for 40 days, right? Not eating. I mean, I've only fasted, the most I've ever gotten is like 3 days. It was like, I gotta have a piece of cheese, you know, it's just, and we know that the enemy says, you know, just change these stones to bread. You know, and the Lord answers with scripture. And then he's whisked away. He's taken to a high place. Just stop and think about that. He's in the desert. Now he's whisked away to some high place someplace. And he's shown in a moment of time all the kingdoms of the world. And the dragon goes, I'll give you all. Just fall down and worship me. Then from there he's taken to a high pinnacle on the temple. Now is that literal? And if it's literal, if he's really on top of the Temple Mount, how did they get there? No one ever asks these questions. How did they get there? It's time displacement, because the dragon is able to move from one place to another. Did they go in a craft? Did they move in a craft? I don't know. Remove this truncated view of the supernatural and look at it and put that on the back burner of, I don't know how Jesus got from the high place of a Temple Mount, but by golly, he got moved somehow.
Yep. It's not just figurative and symbolic.
It's not symbolic. It's not spiritualized. It's not.
So the number 11 here.
And this is my wheelhouse.
Alien abductions with Abby Hornacek. What in the world?
What is she doing, first of all, hosting this thing?
And so tell the audience what it is. It's a program, but what's going on?
I actually covered some of this on my daily update last week. I did a whole program on the Betty and Barney Hill abduction phenomena way back in the 50s. And this made international news, because this was like one of the first abductions that was actually recorded. And under hypnotic regression, they remembered a whole lot of things that they didn't remember in their waking hour. You know, Betty's dress was torn, Barney's shoes were scuffed. I mean, all sorts of weird stuff. 3 hours of missing time, or 2 or 3 hours of missing time. So, you know, Abby Hornacek, and, you know, God bless her. She's doing a service.
She's an actress.
Yes, right? but you know, she's not. Maybe she has been. I don't know. Maybe she studied the abduction phenomena for 30 years like I have. But I've interviewed Dr. David Jacobs. I've interviewed abductees. Al Matthews, the first person, number 4 in our series on abductions. I mean, these are people that it's very visceral. It's gut wrenching.
Spend 30 seconds describing, going back to John Mack and others who are professors, Harvard, in the sense of, this has been officially studied. Again, these aren't crackpot guys. These are PhD guys that are studying.
Real smart people.
What they're looking at the phenomenon. They're like, well, we don't know. Let's study it.
And that's what, you know, bully for John Mack. I mean, he's no longer with us. Dr. David Jacobs studied under Mack. We actually were in a hypnotic regression session about 3 weeks ago with an abductee, a female abductee who was taken. We were trying to see if we could find out more information. We found out more information through the regression. But Mack and Dr. Jacobs and others of their ilk studied the phenomenon and they came to the startling conclusion that this was real, that people were actually taken, that they were flown to other places, that they had missing time, that they became pregnant, that sperm was taken from the men, ovum was taken from the women. This is really nefarious stuff. These people from all, and one of the, and our work on our Watcher series, Dr. David Jacobs, when we removed that implant from Emil, and by the way, Emil comes back in number 4 of the Disclosure series. I interviewed Emil. Gut-wrenching stuff, gut-wrenching. He's just a little kid, he's a 5-year-old kid, and they drag him up through the ceiling. How is it possible? Yeah. And that implant that we removed, we're the only Christian team that's ever done that. We had it analyzed at SEAL Lab. There's no entrance wound where that implant was, and the blood vessels aren't around it, the nerve endings are around it. And this is high strangeness.
It shows up on x-rays and ultrasounds.
Ultrasound.
Yeah. I mean, so here we are, we're summarizing some of these things that are happening in our culture right now in order to discuss the idea of, hey, this stuff is being brought out by, again, legitimate things. The final one I think is, again, this is just from July, just a couple months ago. Senate Report 117-132, the Intelligence Authorization Acts for Fiscal 2023. And LA, I want to read, this is straight from the Senate. And again, what they're doing here is they are following up on what they did the previous year in 2021 in July, talking about the fiscal report. And so you can find this, congress.gov. I mean, and you can see that the title is Intelligence Authorization Act for Fiscal Year 2023. And they're talking about security threats. Of course, it's under that. And I'll just give you an example of some of the headings. Assessment and report on mass migration in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, they're talking about international norms, rules, and principles applicable in space. They're talking about assessments of the effects of sanctions imposed with respect to the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine. So you can see they're talking about national security issues here. This one is, this is on page 12. It's entitled Modification of Requirement for Office to Address Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomenon. So instead of UAP now, they're adding something here. They're calling them the Unidentified Aerospace, not aerial, Aerospace-Undersea Phenomenon. So we have these new anagrams. Now this is what it says. I'm just reading here. So indulge me. Okay. Quote, at a time when cross-domain transmedium threats to United States national security are expanding exponentially. Let's stop there for a minute. Transmedium, what does that mean? A cross-domain transmedium, explain that.
Let's say you've got a craft moving through the air, or you've got a craft moving in outer space. That's 2 completely different mediums. Or you've got an underwater craft. The craft goes from flying at 3 times the speed of sound, or whatever, Mach 3, and then all of a sudden just plunges into the ocean.
No splash.
No splash.
Okay.
How does that work?
So transmedium. Now notice what it says here. Again, officially from the United States national security are expanding exponentially. So threats are expanding exponentially. The committee is disappointed with the slow pace of the Department of Defense-led efforts to establish the office to address those threats and replace the former Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force as required in Section 1683 of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2022. That's what we just read. So they're disappointed that things aren't progressing fast enough. The committee was hopeful that the new office would address many of the structural issues hindering progress. To accelerate progress, the committee has, pursuant to Section 703, renamed the organization formerly known as the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force and the Aerial Object Identification and Management Synchronization Management Group to be the Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomena Joint Program Office. That change reflects the broader scope of the effort directed by Congress. Identification, classification, and scientific study of unidentified aerospace undersea phenomenon is an inherently challenging cross-agency, cross-domain problem requiring an integrated or joint intelligence community and DoD approach. Okay. The new office will continue to be led by DoD with a deputy director named by the intelligence community. The formal DoD, and intelligence community definition of the terms used by the office shall be updated to include space and undersea, which is what you just mentioned, and the scope, I'm almost done here, of the office shall be inclusive of those additional domains with focus on addressing technology, surprise, and unknown unknowns. Okay, I want you to comment on this last sentence. Temporary, non-attributed objects, or those that are positively identified as man-made after analysis, will be passed to appropriate offices and should not be considered on the definition as unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena. This is in the official government report. Are they wearing tin hats?
Well, in some ways they are, because they know, I mean, this is this is the way that things work in the government. We need a committee, we need a task force, we'll change the verbiage, we'll create a new anagram, and somehow, by golly, by gum, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I maintain that certain sections that you would call them the shadow government, they've been in cahoots with these guys for decades. Literally, they know. They know. And look, I had two whistleblowers come up to me, and both of them, one of them was in an underground base, deep underground military base. Saw the grays, saw it's all whites. These are entities working, back engineering, working on craft. Another guy stated that, you know, these guys won't come on the record. So you can't really go public with it. So that's the caveat. Said that his friend who was in one of the agencies had a football game. They're watching over at the guy's house, like a Sunday afternoon, and his friend goes, you know, my son's working in this deep underground military base. Oh, really? What's he doing? Long pause. He's working with aliens side by side. Now, you can do with that. You know, you can say, well, you know, LA, there you go again.
Well, we can't prove that ourselves, but it's anecdotal.
We can't. It's anecdotal, and I understand that. But I've been warning about the mingling of the seed. I've been calling it the coming great deception. I've been quoting scripture, and I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just that the Holy Spirit raised me up for this, like, 30 years ago. I was trained when I was in the New Age over 50 years ago. So this is my wheelhouse. This is what I've always done. I've always was following this. I saw a UFO when I was 12 years old, which changed my life, basically. I've seen 3, and I don't want to see any more. I'm not looking for them. But all I'm trying to say is this, that this is the coming great deception. It ties in with biblical prophecy. We need to heed the words of Jesus, that men would faint from fear what is coming upon the earth, that men's hearts will fail, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. What does that mean? And we could get 4 or 5 people in here and have a lot of different opinions as to what that means. But in my opinion, if this wasn't it, in other words, if UFOs weren't manifesting like this, if Congress wasn't dealing with it, I'd be looking for what was, or what may be manifesting. This is what's manifesting, and it's on steroids. And the fact that Abby Hornacek is talking about alien abductions, and Tucker with the cattle mutilations, they're pulling out all the stops, all the different facets of it. They haven't touched on crop circles yet, but they're going to get there. Yeah, they will. They're going to, and so will we. We spent a lot of time researching the crop circle phenomena. Yeah. Are there hoaxes? Absolutely.
Of course, yeah.
But that's unfortunate. Yeah. But there's also the real deal.
Yeah. I think as we kind of wrap this up, one of the things that we wanted to do here was simply just to give you the facts, give you the evidence of what the government is saying, in many ways what the press is saying. It's come to a point where the government has acknowledged that these incidences are real. There's fact. They're physical. Also, that there is some level of disturbing or malevolent effects that happen, or not good. If you don't want to say the word malevolent, they're not good. And the government really, as far as they've allowed us to see, at least publicly, they're acknowledging that these are negative. These aren't welcomed. They haven't said what they think it is necessarily. They think it's off-world, not of this earth. And what we're trying to do is to come and say, hey, everybody, the government's saying these things. As Christians, we can provide some insight. We can't give all of the answers because we don't know. The Bible doesn't.
Nobody can.
Nobody can. But we're recognizing, hey, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, hey, we have a possibility here or a very strong probability of connecting it to what we've seen has happened in the past. Again, you mentioned 2 Thessalonians 2, the great delusion. We know at the end, as we get approaching to the end, that great deception is coming. And we're trying to equip people right now, number one, to train them to have a biblical worldview for everything.
If this isn't it, then I'd be looking for what was, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the coming. This will, and the springboard for that is a Darwinian paradigm, which says there is no God, there are no miracles, no supernatural, no right or wrong, no absolutes. We just evolved here. But the neo-Darwinists are looking out there, going like, well, wait a minute. The idea of the DNA molecular structure, it just didn't fall out of some tree. Somebody created this, and the neo-Darwinists are going, it's out there. We were created by E.T. Yeah. I'm not making this up. Richard Dawkins stated it in Ben Stein's movie Expelled. You've heard me talk about this in
Panspermia, yeah.
So the idea of panspermia is already in place. The springboard is the Darwinian paradigm, which has supplanted the Christian worldview. We're pushing back and saying this is the strong delusion. This is the coming great deception. It will change every single person's paradigm on this planet unless you know the truth. And you've just heard the truth.
Absolutely. It's interesting to me, again, as many of you know, I love astronomy, and I find it interesting that, I read a lot of things, and I've read Astronomy Magazine for 20 years, and you see their desire, what's known as astrobiology. You can actually go out and get an advanced PhD in astrobiology. It's interesting that it's the one degree that you can get a doctorate in where there's absolutely zero evidence of it occurring. I mean, now granted, I know that they're trying to understand natural, normal, human, or earthly biology and then try to extrapolate it out to the rest of the universe. But here we are. I mean, so LA, let's wrap it up here. That, again, I think you said it well. Our desire is to the best that we can, trying to give a biblical paradigm worldview for what the government is now trickling out to us.
Amen. I mean, and that's, I think to wrap it up, I'll say it again, this is the coming great deception. This will change every person's paradigm. What's this? When they show up, mile-wide craft show up. And people, pilots have seen them. I've talked to people that have seen mile-wide craft in the sky. When you see something like that and close up and personal, in our third film, Brent Small and others see this huge gull-wing, shaped UFO, silently, noiselessly, just come right over, maybe 100 yards up. Huge. And each wing is like 2 football fields. It's really big. It's really huge. And it's just silently moving. You see something like that, it's life-changing. And there's nothing in your paradigm. Remember, I said this in 2019 at one of the conferences. I had the entire audience stand up after my presentation on UFOs, and I had them repeat, I will not be deceived. So folks, you've been watching this program for 45 minutes, whatever it is, and we've outlined the rungs of disclosure. And we are rapidly moving up those rungs. The fact that Fox News has got Abby Hornacek talking about alien abductions, this is George Norrie, I get it. Hi George, I love you.
Yep.
And I'm on your show again soon. But this is Abby Hornacek talking about alien abductions. Yeah. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's being revealed. We're going up the rungs of the ladder. The top ladder, and I don't know how many rungs before we get that, is full-blown disclosure. Yeah. When we see, not reports, when all the cameras are rolling, it's live. I'm standing here in Times Square. You're not going to believe this, ladies and gentlemen, but yeah, pan up there. Okay, yeah, really good, Bob. And there's a close-up of it. It's a very large craft that seems to be hovering there noiselessly. We've had thousands of onlookers here. All traffic is stopped, and we're looking at. I'm making this up as I go along, but that's what it's going to be. Yeah. That's what it's going to be. All stations globally, when they show up, everything changes, just like that.
Yeah. LA, appreciate your time.
Mondo, always good.
Yeah. We could continue to go on, and we probably will.
We have to stop.
Yeah, we could have a good time. But remember, our goal is to equip. Our goal is to educate. It's to prepare you to have these conversations, to think it through. Now's the time. I'd challenge you to go out and ask people, hey, have you ever seen something you didn't know in the sky? I mean, you'll get far more response than what you imagine. That a lot of Christians as well have seen things that are mysterious. Not everything is mysterious. Some things are just an airplane or Venus or Jupiter or whatever. But there is some legitimacy here. And again, our goal is to try to continue to equip you. We're going to continue to add rungs to the ladder and keep you updated on things. As always, I ask for your prayers. We cannot do this. We know it is a spiritual battle. Ephesians 6:12. Our
Amen.
struggle is real. Appreciate your prayers more than anything else. And so we appreciate you watching this prophecy update, and we'll see you next time.